Look, good morning to you, Paul and Bushle. Now, the issue of it being a virtual meeting, I don't think that's unusual because ever since the outbreak of coronavirus, the ANC, as have other political parties, have held all their meetings virtually. But what has been an issue, though, for the ANC, at least after the last meeting of the NEC, was the concern around the leaking of some of the discussions at the ANC meetings, which is why we now know what Dakota Legoete had to say about the president, which is why we now know what Sbu Ngalwa had to say about some of the judges. So I guess then it's a matter of the ANC just deciding whether to go back to a physical meeting. They do have regular meetings for every 2 months, but this was a special NEC meeting. Perhaps one could argue the organization or the logistics around it, and also if anyone was to organize the logistics, it would have probably had been Ace Magashule's office, and given the rocky situation and also the fact that people were not sure whether it's suspended or not, and the confusion that preceded this meeting, I guess perhaps it was inevitable that the meeting would go ahead as planned. But I do expect, though, given the leaking, the leaking of the audio of those meetings, that we will probably have a physical NEC meeting the next time. But coming into the issue around what went down yesterday, well, it was always expected to be a rocky start because two things were at play. One, had Ace Magashule, as he had defiantly said, been allowed to sit in that meeting, what the message would have communicated is that whatever decision that had been taken earlier in the week by the NWC was pretty much null and void, for a lack of a better word, and also suggests that he still holds some level of sway. So, and at the same time, for him to go to the meeting and to have to be kicked out of the meeting, I think it is embarrassing for him, and also it could be further damaging for him politically. It has not been a good week for Ace Magashule going into this meeting, because we all remember that late night confusion on Wednesday when his letter of suspension leaked, and then there was his counteraction where he also sought to suspend the president of the party. But obviously the ANC being quick to come out to say that suspension of the president, or supposed suspension of the president, does not hold any water. It has no bearing, as there was no structure of the ANC that took such a decision. So I think Ace Magashule is fighting to the death, but I think he's making a number of political blunders as he goes along. And I can tell you now, while yesterday he may have been kicked out, and while there may have been commotion yesterday with some members questioning the presence of the president does enjoy the overwhelming support of the NEC. And this was also said by Ace Magashule when he spoke to the public broadcaster on Thursday, that the Ramaphosa faction in the NEC does hold sway. So it is expected, which also explains to us why you have some of his supporters, including Teniengeni, criticizing the urge by members to take decisions to a vote, saying that is un-ANC. The ANC has always been one party that takes decisions through consensus, but now this push that things must go to the head is actually influenced by the fact that faction knows that it is dominant in the party. So the question now becomes, what does Ace Magashule do with his time now that he is out of the office temporarily? Does he do what Jacob Zuma did? Does he have as much support as Jacob Zuma? I don't think so, but I do think that the only way we can measure whether Cyril Ramaphosa has the overall support of ANC structure is the very National General Council that Ace Magashule supporters have been calling for. They've been calling for an early conference. Then Dakota Legoete, in that recording that we have been playing, says the same thing. And I do not believe that they do have the support that they purport to have. But I also do not believe that the ANC has enough structures in place to tell us now who commands what support where, because remember, most of the provinces have yet to go to conference, and most of their lower structures, your sub-regions, and branches, still have to go to conference. Those were affected by the COVID-19. So the next few months, as they prepare for those BGMs, for those regional conferences, provincial conferences. That is where you can gauge the mood as to who among these leaders has the support on the ground. But I can tell you now, there will be a lot of work that is done between now and next year. Because remember, December next year, the 5-year term of Cyril Ramaphosa and the entire NEC expires.
Now, Sbu, another two-pronged question here. The first one about these leaked audios. Simply, what does it matter? They are leaked, of course, but they're not really exposing something that we weren't aware of. I haven't, unfortunately, been privy to Jesse Duarte's audio, but, you know, from what we've heard already, it's nothing new. The second question that I have for you, Ace Magashule, you mentioned the fact that he's making blunders. It seems to me that he's fighting, kicking and screaming, going down without a fight, essentially. They're calling for this early conference. His side, his faction in particular. What is the plan with all of this? I mean, you know, it seems a bit more desperate than anything else from Ace Magashule. Apparently his emails don't work anymore. His access card to Lutuli House has been revoked as well. His access has been revoked. What is going on with Magashule at the moment?
Now, to answer your first question, it may seem as though that it's nothing we have not had. Perhaps that's also a reflection of how things have deteriorated in the ANC. And I can say that in as much as we know some of the decisions in the ANC, every political party and every organization, including ourselves as a TV station, we do have discussions that are meant to be just internal discussions among ourselves. So if you have audio or some of those discussions finding their way into the public domain, obviously there are issues of invasion of privacy, and the NEC meeting is a meeting of no more than 90 people, as I understand. There are 80 people who are directly elected, and then there's the top 6, and then there are the leagues that also attend. So it's probably, including staff and everyone else, should probably be around 100 people. This is supposed to be the safe space for ANC leaders to be able to talk about issues that affect the organization. But because of the deep divisions in the ANC, that's why we're now able to say, Buhle, that this is nothing that we have not had before. I mean, if you listen to Dakota, yes, we've had those. But I mean, when he says, let's go to an early conference, it's the first time that we hear someone say that. But also the leaking of the audio, we must call it what it is. It's deliberate. It's meant to kind of to drive a certain narrative. It's meant to achieve a particular end, because Dakota Legoete is one member of the NEC, and there are 86 people in the NEC that is directly elected, and also the top 6, and add to that the different leagues, Youth League now, which also attends 2 members of the Youth League entity. You've got the Women's League, you've got the Veterans Leagues. Now, those are also represented there, but what we have is one member. But so I can say, we must be clear, though, that it's deliberate. It's meant to push a particular narrative, but as journalists, we should be able to reflect what is being said, what is being done, but also contextualize it correctly, that while we may have had this, what really is at play is that the grouping that is aligned to Ace Magashule is on the back foot and does not have the numbers when it comes to that very NEC. Cyril Ramaphosa has been able over time to sway most of those members behind him, and which is why we now have an Ace Magashule who was kicked out of a meeting, who now cannot address party events as ANC Secretary General, but he's still defiant. He's still saying that he continue as the Secretary General of the ANC. But what this tells you is that politically, yes, he is desperate, but at the same time, Ace Magashule is someone who has always had his way. I mean, this is a man who was at the helm of the Free State for the longest time, having led its northern region from the early 90s and to the 1993, 1994, when he was made an MEC there under Terra Legoete. He fought with Terra Legoete, leading to him being sent to Parliament so as to quell those differences there. But he managed to bounce back in 98 and has been leading the ANC in the Free State for the longest time, and he has successfully dealt with opponents. I mean his former allies. There's a long list of his former allies who now are his sworn enemies. Your Thabo Manyonis, your Sibongile Pesanis, your Mxolisi Dukwana. So he has had his way along the way, but over the years. But what has not happened, and I think that for him the biggest issue is that playing his politics on a national stage is totally different from a provincial stage, and perhaps he may not have transitioned to the national stage and to play in the nuances that are necessary to play the political game at this level. But also, what is more, while he may be talking tough about his still Secretary General, the ground does not reflect that, because even in his very province, Free State, he does not have the support of all of that leadership. There was a decision, you should remember, a week or so ago, where the provincial secretary there, Pasika Nompondo, sending a letter to the lawyers saying that Ace Magashule and the former chairperson of the province, Sam Mashinini, do not represent the ANC in the province when they were appealing against that Supreme Court of Appeals ruling, which nullified the 2018 provincial conference. So that tells you that even in his province, he doesn't command he doesn't command this respect. In fact, not just command the support. His home region, which is Fezleta, his family behind him. I think there are two other regions that are behind him. But we saw structures in Mangaung saying, no, we support the decision of the NEC insofar as the step-aside rule applies, which in effect means that they do not support Ace Magashule. But also, ANC conferences, Buhle, are about numbers. If you don't have these at least three crucial provinces, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, and the Eastern Cape, you cannot claim to be in charge of the ANC, because in terms of numbers, add to that Gauteng, in terms of numbers, those are the provinces whose voice matters, because at a conference is determined by the number of branches represented, and those branches are represented by at least 2 delegates. Now that determines where the sway is. I cannot sit here today and say that Ace Magashule has the support of those provinces. If you do not have at least those provinces, or you can split one in the middle, as Jacob Zuma did in 2007 with the Eastern Cape, then one cannot safely say that he commands that support. But importantly, though, Butle, let me make this point before throwing it back to you. The ANC at this point does not have enough structures in place or in good standing for one to be able to read the mood correctly as to who among these leaders has the support where. Yes, you still have the PECs, which is the provincial executives, but those PECs take their mandate from the branches, and a lot has happened since many of those PECs were elected, and many of them are already beyond their term. So as I say to you, the next few months, as political activities are resuming, as branch general meetings are being held, as regional conferences are being held, as provincial conferences are being held, that is what is going to tell us where the mood is.
Very quickly, if you'll allow me to interrupt you for the sake of time, I don't know if you'll be able to answer 2 questions at one go, but we know that Ace Magashule is also facing another battlefield with the NPA. In fact, he's already sent out a word of caution to the NPA, saying that he needs his docket quite urgently so he can prepare for his case. Let's talk about what else. You mentioned that you wonder, of course, what does Ace Magashule do with his spare time? I suppose he has another battle to fight.
Yes, that's correct, Paul. That case is going to the High Court. At his last appearance in the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court, that's on the 19th of March, the parties involved in the case, the legal parties, agreed on a date of August the 4th, and that also means that that case is now being transferred to the High Court. That's where it will be heard. And from the NPA side, outside the court, they said that from their side, they were pretty much ready to go ahead. But obviously, Ace Magashule, it's important for him that if he's to fight politically, he also has to ward off his legal troubles, because that also will require his time. And remember, the case there is that it's regarding that crucial contract, which is the asbestos contract. And at the last appearance, because for the longest time, the question was, how do you link Ace Magashule to this case? At the last appearance, there were other people who were arrested, and one of them was his former head of legal services in the Premier's office. And the NPA's charge is that Ace Magashule's Premier had centralized major contracts to the Premier's office. So everything had to be ticked off by his office. So now they are making a link between his office, Black Hat Consulting, that is owned by Edwin Sodi, and the monies that came back and where his office would command or ask for certain donations here and there. That seems to be where the issue is. So obviously, Ace Magashule, it's important for him to be able to fight his legal battles at the same time while he's fighting his political battles. But how much time that will take, we do not know, as these cases do tend to take a long time.
Absolutely. And, of course, we're going to have to leave it there.